The sun cast long shadows over Randsburg, California, as Willa Zimmerman stood frozen in place, her heart hammering against her ribs. Not 20 feet away, a man lay sprawled in the dirt, blood seeping through his tattered shirt while curious townsfolk gathered to gawk at what they presumed was just another dead drifter. Yet something in Willa refused to accept this conclusion. The slight rise and fall of his chest told a different story. It was 1879, and Randsburg was enjoying the early fruits of a promising gold rush. The town had sprung up almost overnight, drawing prospectors, merchants, and desperate souls from across the country. Willa had arrived just 3 months earlier, following her father's passing and the subsequent loss of their farm in Missouri. At 24, she had learned to be practical about survival, taking a position as the town's schoolteacher while living in the modest room above the schoolhouse. The wounded man stirred slightly, causing the onlookers to step back. Sheriff Mills pushed through the crowd, his weathered face contorting into a frown. "Another gunslinger," he muttered, nudging the man's boot with his toe. "Looks like someone got the better of him." "He's still alive," Willa said, stepping forward. "We should get him to the doctor." The sheriff's eyes narrowed. "Miss Zimmerman, this ain't your concern. Doc Walker's busy with Mrs. Peterson's childbirth. Besides, men like this bring nothing but trouble." Willa scanned the stranger's face, strong jaw covered in several days' worth of stubble, dark hair matted with sweat and dust. His clothes, though filthy, had once been of good quality. A holster hung at his hip empty. "I can't just leave him here," she insisted, already kneeling beside the injured man. "Help me get him to the schoolhouse. I have supplies there." "Miss Zimmerman," the sheriff began. "Please," she interrupted. "It's the Christian thing to do." After a moment of hesitation, 2 miners volunteered to help carry the stranger to her quarters. As they lifted him, Willa caught sight of something near where he had lain, a small, injured sparrow, its wing bent at an unnatural angle. Without thinking, she scooped it up gently, cradling it in her palms. "A wounded bird, too. You planning to save the whole world today, Miss Zimmerman?" Sheriff Mills remarked with a sardonic chuckle. Willa didn't respond. Instead, she carefully placed the bird in her pocket and hurried after the men carrying the unconscious stranger. The schoolhouse was mercifully empty, the children having been dismissed hours earlier. The men deposited the wounded stranger on Willa's narrow bed upstairs before departing with warnings about the foolishness of her actions. Alone with the injured man, Willa first attended to the bird, fashioning a small splint for its wing from a twig and a strip of cloth. She placed it in a small box lined with a soft handkerchief. "There now, little one," she whispered. "Rest while I tend to your companion in misfortune." Turning her attention to the man, Willa removed his blood-soaked shirt to reveal a bullet wound in his left shoulder. The bullet appeared to have passed clean through, but the wound was angry and inflamed. She worked methodically, cleaning the injury with whiskey from the small bottle she kept for medicinal purposes, then applying a poultice of herbs she'd learned to prepare from her mother. As she wrapped clean bandages around his shoulder, the stranger's eyes flickered open. They were the color of storm clouds, alert despite his weakened state. "Who are you?" he rasped, attempting to sit up. "Lie still," Willa commanded, pressing him gently back against the pillow. "I'm Willa Zimmerman, the schoolteacher. You're in Randsburg." He relaxed slightly, though wariness remained in his gaze. Owen Callahan. "Mr. Callahan, you've been shot. The bullet's gone through, thankfully, but you've lost blood and there's risk of fever." Owen's eyes darted around the room, taking in his surroundings. "My gun? Not here. You were unarmed when they found you in the street." A flicker of alarm crossed his face before he masked it. "How long have I been here?" "Just under an hour." Willa finished securing the bandage. "Who shot you, Mr. Callahan?" "Better you don't know, Miss Zimmerman." His voice was stronger now, though still rough with pain. A soft chirping sound drew their attention to the box on Willa's small table. "What's that?" Owen asked. "A sparrow with a broken wing." "I found it in the street beside you." Willa moved to check on the tiny creature, which peered up at her with bright, frightened eyes. Strange coincidence. Two wounded beings side by side in the dust. "No coincidence," Owen murmured, watching her gentle movements as she adjusted the bird's makeshift nest. "That bird's been following me for days. Noticed it first outside Red Gulch, flying alongside my horse." Willa raised an eyebrow skeptically. "Sparrows don't typically follow travelers, Mr. Callahan." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "This one did. Maybe it knew I was riding toward trouble." He closed his eyes, exhaustion evident in the lines of his face. "You should have left me there, Miss Zimmerman. I'm not worth your trouble." "I don't believe that," Willa replied firmly. "Every life has value." "Even a gunslinger's?" he asked, eyes still closed. Willa hesitated. "Is that what you are?" Owen didn't answer, his breathing deepening as he slipped back into unconsciousness. Willa sighed, pulling her rocking chair closer to the bed to keep watch through the night. She'd have to sleep in the classroom below, but first, she needed to ensure his fever didn't worsen. As darkness fell over Randsburg, Willa found herself studying Owen Callahan's face in the soft lamplight. There was something in his features that spoke of more than just a hired gun, a gentleness around the mouth, perhaps, or the furrow between his brows that suggested he carried burdens beyond physical wounds. "What secrets are you keeping, Owen Callahan?" she whispered to the quiet room. The injured sparrow chirped softly in response, as if it alone knew the answer. Morning brought a light knock at her door. Willa, who had dozed fitfully in her chair, startled awake to find Owen watching her with those intense gray eyes. "You stayed," he observed, his voice stronger than the previous night. "Of course I stayed. You have a bullet wound." Willa stood and straightened her rumpled skirts. The knock came again, and she hurried downstairs to find Doc Walker, looking tired after his night attending Mrs. Peterson. "Sheriff told me you've taken in a wounded man," he said without preamble. "I have. He's upstairs." Doc Walker followed her up to the small room, his experienced eyes quickly assessing Owen's condition. "You've done well, Miss Zimmerman. The wound is clean, no sign of serious infection." He checked Owen's pulse and temperature. "Fever's mild. Keep him hydrated and resting. Change the bandages twice daily." "How long until he can travel?" Owen asked, his tone making it clear he didn't intend to linger. The doctor frowned. "At least a week, preferably 2. That shoulder needs time to heal, or you risk permanent damage." Owen's jaw tightened, but he nodded curtly. After the doctor left, Willa brought a cup of broth and helped Owen sit up enough to drink it. "You can stay here until you're recovered," she said. "I'll make a pallet downstairs for myself." "I can't impose. It's not an imposition if I'm offering," she interrupted. "Besides, you have nowhere else to go, do you?" Owen's silence confirmed her suspicion. "Children will be arriving soon for their lessons," Willa continued, moving to check on the sparrow, which looked somewhat more lively this morning. "Try to rest. I'll check on you during the noon break." Throughout the day, Willa found her thoughts continually drifting to the man recuperating upstairs. Her students noticed her distraction, exchanging glances when she lost her place in their reading lesson twice. At midday, she hurried upstairs with a plate of stew purchased from the hotel restaurant. She found Owen sitting up, examining the sparrow's splinted wing with remarkable gentleness for hands that looked accustomed to harsher work. "She's doing better," he commented as Willa entered. "Smart little thing, knows to stay still and let the healing happen. Unlike some patients I could mention," Willa replied with a pointed look at his position. Owen's mouth quirked upward. "Touché, Miss Zimmerman." He accepted the stew gratefully. "You didn't have to feed me as well as house me. Consider it part of the Christian charity the sheriff accused me of." "Ah, so you're saving my soul as well as my life." There was something both teasing and bitter in his tone. Willa sat in her rocking chair, studying him. "What were you doing in Randsburg, Mr. Callahan?" "We're not exactly on the main routes." Owen took his time chewing a bite of stew before answering. "Looking for someone. Someone who apparently found you first and shot you." He nodded slightly. "That's the trouble with looking for dangerous men. Sometimes they don't want to be found." "And why were you looking for this dangerous man?" Owen set down his spoon, his appetite apparently gone. "Miss Zimmerman, there are things about my life that would shock a respectable woman like yourself. It's better you don't know." "I'm not as delicate as I appear," Willa countered. "And if I'm harboring a man who might bring danger to my doorstep, I deserve to know why." For a long moment, Owen said nothing, his eyes fixed on some middle distance. Finally, he sighed. "I was a lawman once. U.S. Marshal based out of Denver. The man I was tracking. He killed my partner. And my wife." Willa's breath caught. "I'm so sorry. It was 3 years ago. I've been hunting him ever since." Owen's voice was flat, emotionless, but his knuckles were white where he gripped the edge of the plate. "His name is James Harker. He was a banker we were investigating for fraud. When we came to arrest him, he was ready. Shot Tom, my partner, before either of us could draw. Then he paused, swallowing hard. My wife Eliza was at our office that day bringing us lunch. She was in the wrong place at the wrong time. And you've been tracking him since." "I resigned my badge the day after we buried them. The Marshal Service has been hunting Harker too, but I'm not interested in seeing him stand trial. I want justice of a different kind." The cold determination in his voice sent a shiver down Willa's spine. "Vengeance, you mean?" Owen met her gaze unflinchingly. "Call it what you will. And this man is in Randsburg now." He was. "I tracked him here, but he recognized me before I could confront him. Hence this." He gestured to his bandaged shoulder. Willa stood and moved to the window, looking out at the dusty main street of Randsburg with new eyes. Somewhere out there was a killer who had already shot Owen once. "Will he come looking for you?" "Probably. He knows I didn't die in the street. He'll want to finish what he started." "Then we need to get you somewhere safer than my schoolhouse," Willa said decisively. "There are children here during the day." Owen's expression softened with concern. "You're right. I should leave as soon as possible." "That's not what I meant. You need time to heal." Willa paced the small room, thinking. "My father's friend, Mr. Patterson, has a small cabin about 2 miles outside of town. He uses it during hunting season, but it's empty now. We could move you there tonight. I'm coming with you, of course." Owen straightened, wincing as the movement pulled at his wound. "Absolutely not. I won't put you in danger. You're in no condition to care for yourself, Mr. Callahan, and I've already involved myself by bringing you here." Willa crossed her arms, her expression resolute. "Besides, if this Harker is as dangerous as you say, he might come looking for you here regardless. I'd rather not be here alone if he does." Owen studied her for a long moment, clearly weighing his options. "You're remarkably stubborn for a schoolteacher." "I prefer determined," Willa replied with a small smile. "I'll make arrangements this afternoon. We'll leave after dark." As she turned to go, Owen called after her. "Miss Zimmerman." She paused at the doorway. "Thank you." The simple words carried a weight of genuine gratitude that warmed Willa unexpectedly. She nodded once and descended the stairs, her mind already planning their discreet departure. Securing the use of Patterson's cabin proved simpler than expected. The elderly storekeeper had always had a soft spot for Willa, having been fond of her father. When she explained she needed a quiet place to nurse an injured friend away from the noise of town, he readily agreed, handing over the key with minimal questions. Borrowing a wagon was another matter. Willa approached Mr. Daniels at the livery stable, concocting a story about needing to visit a sick student outside of town. At night, Daniels asked skeptically. The family works their claim during the day, Willa improvised. Evening is the only time they're all at home. Daniels didn't look entirely convinced, but Willa's reputation for compassionate involvement with her students' families worked in her favor. He agreed to have a wagon ready by sundown. As dusk fell, Willa packed essentials: food, medical supplies, changes of clothing, and the box containing the recovering Sparrow. She had dismissed her last class early, claiming a headache, to prepare without arousing suspicion. Owen was waiting when she returned, dressed in his cleaned and mended clothes. His face was pale from the effort of preparing himself, but determination shone in his eyes. "You should be resting," Willa chided, helping him into his coat. "I've rested enough." Owen stood carefully, testing his balance. The sooner we're away from here, the better. They slipped out the back door of the schoolhouse and made their way through the shadows to the livery. True to his word, Daniels had a wagon ready, though he raised an eyebrow at Owen's presence. "This is my cousin," Willa explained smoothly. "He's accompanying me for propriety's sake." Whether Daniels believed her or not, he simply nodded and helped Owen onto the wagon seat while Willa stowed their supplies in the back. Within minutes, they were on the road out of town, the lantern swinging gently from the wagon's front, casting long shadows on the dusty trail. They traveled in tense silence for the first mile, both scanning the darkness for any sign of pursuit. Only when the lights of Randsburg had faded completely behind them did Willa feel some of the tension leave Owen's rigid posture. "You think he saw us leave?" she asked quietly. "If he was watching, he did," Owen replied grimly. "But I don't think he expected me to leave town so soon. We may have bought ourselves some time." The Patterson cabin came into view as they rounded a bend in the road, a sturdy, if modest, structure nestled against a rocky hillside. A small creek gurgled nearby, providing a natural source of water. The location was ideal, visible enough from the road that it didn't appear secretive, yet positioned with the hill at its back to prevent anyone approaching unseen from behind. Willa helped Owen down from the wagon and unlocked the cabin door. Inside was simple but clean: a main room with a stone fireplace, a small kitchen area, a single bedroom, and a lean-to addition that served as a storage space. The furnishings were sparse but adequate: a table with 4 chairs, a settee by the fireplace, and a bed visible through the bedroom doorway. "It's not fancy, but it should serve our purposes," Willa said, lighting a lamp. Owen stood in the center of the room, taking in their surroundings with a tactical eye. "It's defensible," he noted. "Good sight lines to the road." He moved to check the back windows. "Only one approach from behind, and that's up a steep hill. Patterson chose well." Willa set about lighting a fire in the hearth while Owen unloaded their supplies from the wagon. Despite his injury, he insisted on helping, though Willa noticed how he favored his wounded shoulder. "You should rest," she said when the cabin was secure and their belongings stowed. "The journey has taken a toll." Owen didn't argue, which told Willa just how exhausted he truly was. She helped him remove his coat and boots before he stretched out on the bed. Within minutes, his breathing had deepened into sleep. Willa checked on the Sparrow, which had settled comfortably in its box by the fire. Then she made a pallet for herself on the settee, knowing sleep would be elusive as she listened for any sound that might indicate danger. The night passed quietly, broken only by the occasional call of an owl or the distant howl of a coyote. Willa dozed fitfully, waking at every unfamiliar sound. When dawn finally broke, she rose stiffly from her makeshift bed and stoked the fire before putting coffee on to boil. The aroma roused Owen, who appeared in the bedroom doorway looking rumpled but more rested than he had the previous day. "You actually slept," Willa observed, pouring him a cup of the strong coffee. "First time in weeks," he admitted, accepting the cup gratefully. Having someone else on watch helps. They shared a simple breakfast of biscuits and bacon that Willa had packed. As they ate, Willa noticed Owen watching the sparrow, which was hopping cautiously around its box, testing its injured wing. "The bird's healing quickly," he commented. "Yes. Animals often recover faster than humans, provided their injuries aren't too severe." Willa offered the sparrow a few crumbs, which it pecked at eagerly. "This one has a strong will to live, like its rescuer," Owen said softly. When Willa glanced up in surprise, he added, "It takes a certain kind of strength to leave everything behind and start fresh in a place like Randsburg. Most women wouldn't have managed it." "Most women aren't left with a failing farm and mounting debts after their father dies," Willa replied matter-of-factly, though his recognition of her resilience pleased her. "What brought you to Randsburg specifically?" "The advertisement for a teacher." Small mining towns often struggle to find educated women willing to take on the role. Willa sipped her coffee. "The pay is decent, and the children are eager to learn despite their rough circumstances. It's rewarding work." "And lonely." Owen's perception was uncomfortably accurate. Willa shrugged. "Sometimes, but I have my books, my students. The townspeople are kind, if a bit wary of a woman who lives alone." "No suitors?" The question seemed to surprise Owen himself, as if it had slipped out unbidden. "A few persistent attempts from the widower who runs the assay office," Willa admitted with a small smile. "But he's interested in a housekeeper more than a wife, I suspect. I've made it clear I'm content with my independence." Their conversation was interrupted by the sound of an approaching wagon. Owen was on his feet instantly, moving to the window with a fluidity that belied his injury. His hand went automatically to his hip, though his holster was still empty. "It's just the Patterson boy," Willa said, recognizing the gangly teenager driving the wagon. "Probably sent by his father to check on us." Nevertheless, Owen positioned himself beside the door, out of sight, as Willa went out to greet young Thomas Patterson. "Pa sent me with some supplies," the boy explained, handing down a crate of provisions. "Said you might need them staying out here a spell." "That's very thoughtful," Willa replied. "Please thank him for me." Thomas peered curiously toward the cabin. "Pa mentioned you had a sick friend." "Anybody I know?" "No, just a cousin passing through." Willa kept her tone casual. "Is everything all right in town? Same as usual?" Thomas scratched his head. "Though there was some excitement at the saloon last night, some fancy-dressed feller asking questions about a wounded man. Sheriff ran him off, said we didn't need his kind causing trouble." Willa's heart raced, but she maintained her composure. "Well, Randsburg has enough excitement without adding more. Thank you for the supplies, Thomas." Once the boy had departed, Willa hurried back inside to find Owen already preparing to leave. "You heard?" she asked. "Enough." Owen was buckling on a worn saddle bag. "Harker's in town looking for me. I need to go before he tracks us here. In your condition, that's madness." Willa set down the crate and blocked his path to the door. "You'll tear open that wound before you get half a mile. Better that than bringing his violence down on you." Owen's expression was grim. "I've seen what Harker does to people who get in his way. I won't let that happen to you." "And I won't let you throw away your life on a suicide mission," Willa countered, her voice rising with emotion. "You're in no condition to confront him. This isn't your fight." "It became my fight the moment I pulled you from that street." Willa's hands were trembling, but she held her ground. You said yourself that Harker killed your wife because she was in the wrong place at the wrong time. What do you think he'll do to me if he finds out I helped you?" The color drained from Owen's face. "All the more reason for me to leave, draw him away from here. Or all the more reason to wait, to heal, to approach this with a clear head instead of blind vengeance." Willa stepped closer, her voice softening. "I understand wanting justice, Owen, but getting yourself killed won't bring it to anyone." Something in her words reached him. The tension in his shoulders eased slightly, and he ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "I can't just sit here while he's out there." "You can. You must." Willa tentatively placed a hand on his arm. "Give yourself time to heal. Plan carefully. That's how you'll succeed." For a long moment, Owen looked down at her hand on his arm, conflict evident in his features. Finally, he nodded once, conceding to her logic if not entirely to her sentiment. "3 days," he said. "I'll give it 3 days to regain my strength. Then I'm going after him, with or without your blessing." It wasn't the outcome Willa had hoped for, but it was a start. 3 days, she agreed, knowing she would use every minute to try to change his mind. The following days established an uneasy routine. Willa tended to Owen's wound, which was healing remarkably well under her care. She also gave attention to the sparrow, whose wing was mending nicely. The tiny bird had grown accustomed to their presence, hopping about the cabin with increasing confidence, though it remained unable to fly. Owen spent hours cleaning and maintaining the revolver Willa had retrieved from the storekeeper's stock of pawned items. Though he didn't speak much about his plans, the methodical way he checked and rechecked the weapon told its own story. On the afternoon of the second day, as rain pattered gently against the cabin roof, Owen watched Willa carefully removing the splint from the sparrow's wing. "It's healed well," she commented, examining the delicate bones. "Another few days and it should be ready to fly." "You have healing hands," Owen observed from his seat by the fire. "That bird would have died without your intervention, as would you, perhaps." Willa glanced up at him. "Though I suspect you're too stubborn to die easily." A ghost of a smile touched Owen's lips. "Stubborn, yes. My Eliza used to say it was both my best and worst quality." His expression softened at the memory. "She was a lot like you, actually. Determined, compassionate to a fault." Willa carefully placed the sparrow back in its box, giving it a small dish of water and some seeds. "Tell me about her," she said quietly. For a moment, she thought Owen would refuse, retreat back into the shell of grief and anger he wore so habitually. But something in the peaceful atmosphere of the rain-washed afternoon seemed to loosen the tight hold he kept on his memories. "She was a schoolteacher, too, when we met," he began, his voice low and rich with remembrance. "Teaching in a little town outside of Denver. I was investigating a cattle rustling case nearby. Stopped in at the schoolhouse to ask about suspicious strangers in the area." A genuine smile spread across his face. "She gave me such a lecture about interrupting her lessons that I clean forgot why I was there in the first place." Willa smiled, settling into the chair opposite him. "She sounds formidable." She was. Brilliant mind, fierce heart. Owen's eyes took on a distant look. "We were married 6 months later. She kept teaching after we wed, but she also helped with my cases, sometimes had a way of seeing details I missed, connections I'd overlook." "That's why she was at your office that day," Willa realized. Owen nodded, the pain of the memory etched in the lines around his eyes. Harker had been clever, covering his tracks. Eliza was the one who found the discrepancy in his accounts that proved the fraud. She was bringing us the ledger she'd discovered, evidence that would have put him away for years. He fell silent, staring into the fire. Willa didn't press him to continue, respecting the sanctity of his grief. After a long pause, Owen spoke again, his voice rougher than before. 3 years I've been tracking him. 3 years of following cold trails and missed opportunities. Then a month ago I got a solid lead, a witness who'd seen him in Red Gulch. I was close this time, closer than I've ever been. And now he knows I'm alive, knows I'm still hunting him. He'll either run again or try to finish what he started. Owen's hand tightened around the revolver in his lap. Either way, I'll be ready. And after, Willa asked softly, after you find him and do what you've set out to do, what then? The question seemed to startle Owen, as if the concept of an after had never occurred to him. I don't know, he admitted. I haven't thought past finding Harker. Perhaps that's the problem, Willa suggested gently. Vengeance is consuming you, leaving no room for healing, for a future. Owen's expression hardened. What future? Everything I had died with Eliza. Not everything, Willa countered. You're still here, Owen, still capable of building a new life if you choose to. Easy for you to say, he retorted, a flash of anger coloring his words. You haven't lost what I've lost. Haven't I? Willa rose from her chair, suddenly needing distance. I lost my mother to influenza when I was 16. My father to heart failure last year, our farm to creditors. Everything and everyone I loved gone. She moved to the window, watching raindrops track down the glass. The difference is, I chose to live anyway, to build something new from the ashes. The cabin fell silent except for the sound of rain and the occasional pop from the fire. Willa didn't turn around, afraid of what she might see in Owen's face, pity, perhaps, or worse, indifference. After what seemed an eternity, she heard him rise and approach. His reflection appeared beside hers in the window glass. I'm sorry, he said simply. You're right to call me out on my selfishness. Willa turned to face him. It's not selfishness I see in you, Owen. It's a man so wounded that he's forgotten how to live without pain. Owen studied her face, something shifting in his eyes. You see too much, Willa Zimmerman. It was the first time he'd used her given name, and the intimacy of it sent a warmth through her that had nothing to do with the fire's heat. The Sparrow, he said suddenly, nodding toward the box where the small bird was now sleeping. When you first found it, its wing was broken. Now it's healing, preparing to fly again. His voice grew softer. You saved that bird, Willa. You saved me too, I think. I was broken once, still am in many ways. The vulnerability in his admission touched Willa deeply. Without thinking, she reached up and gently touched his cheek. Broken things can mend, Owen, if given time, if given care. For a breath, they stood close enough that Willa could feel the warmth radiating from him, could see the flecks of blue in his storm-gray eyes. Then Owen stepped back, the moment fragile as spun glass between them. It's getting late, he said, his voice rougher than before. You should rest. Tomorrow will bring its own challenges. Willa nodded, though sleep was the furthest thing from her mind. As she prepared for bed, she wondered at the strange turn her life had taken from the quiet routine of her schoolhouse to this isolated cabin, harboring a wounded man bent on vengeance, yet showing glimpses of a soul capable of healing. The rain continued through the night, washing the landscape clean. By morning, the world outside the cabin sparkled with renewed freshness, the scent of wet sage and pine drifting through the open windows. Willa woke to find Owen already up, moving about the cabin with more ease than the previous days. His color was better, his movements less guarded. The wound was healing well, though Willa knew it would be weeks before his shoulder regained its full strength. I checked the road earlier, he informed her as she prepared breakfast. No sign of anyone approaching from town. That's good news, Willa replied, though she knew it did little to change his plans. Today marked the third day of their agreement. They ate in companionable silence, both aware of the unspoken deadline hovering between them. After the meal, Owen helped clean up, then retrieved his gun belt from where it hung by the door. "You're still determined to go," Willa said. It wasn't a question. Owen nodded, buckling the belt around his waist. "I gave my word. 3 days." "At least wait until we know more about Harker's whereabouts," Willa argued. "Rushing in blindly is what got you shot the first time. I'll be more careful now." Willa opened her mouth to object further when a sound outside caught their attention: hoofbeats, approaching rapidly. Owen was at the window in an instant, his expression darkening. "2 riders," he reported tersely. "Coming fast." He drew his revolver, checking it one last time. "Stay inside, away from the windows." "Owen, please, Willa." The look he gave her brooked no argument. "I won't have you caught in the crossfire." Before she could respond, he was out the door, positioning himself on the small porch where he had a clear view of the approaching riders. Willa's heart hammered in her chest as she peered through a gap in the curtains. The riders were now close enough to identify Sheriff Mills and Thomas Patterson, both looking grim as they pulled their horses to a stop in front of the cabin. "Callahan," the sheriff called, not dismounting. "Need to speak with you." Owen kept his revolver lowered but ready. "What's the matter, Sheriff? Got trouble in town? Man named Harker's been asking questions about you and Miss Zimmerman. Nasty piece of work by the look of him." Willa stepped out onto the porch, ignoring Owen's warning glance. "Is he still in Randsburg?" Sheriff Mills nodded. "Holed up at the hotel. Got 2 men with him now, rough types. They've been drinking heavily, making threats." "What kind of threats?" Owen asked sharply. "Said something about burning down the schoolhouse to smoke you out," Thomas piped up. "Pa sent me to warn you straight away when we heard." Willa gasped. "The school?" "But the children, classes are canceled today," Sheriff Mills assured her. "We've spread the word." "But Callahan, this man seems dead set on finding you, and he doesn't care who gets hurt in the process." Owen's expression hardened into cold resolve. "Then it's time I faced him." "That's suicide," the sheriff objected. "He's got numbers on his side." "Not for long." Owen turned to Willa, his decision clearly made. "I have to go back. If I don't, he'll tear apart Randsburg looking for me, and innocent people will get hurt." Willa knew he was right, though every instinct screamed against it. "Then I'm coming with you." "Absolutely not. This isn't negotiable, Owen." Willa matched his determined tone. "That schoolhouse is my home, those children my responsibility. I won't cower out here while Harker threatens them." For a moment it seemed Owen would argue further. Then, recognizing the futility, he nodded once. "Stay close to me. Do exactly as I say." Sheriff Mills cleared his throat. "I've got men gathering at the jail. We'll meet you at the edge of town, come up with a plan." "No," Owen said firmly. "This is my fight, Sheriff. I appreciate the warning, but I won't risk your men." "It's my town," Mills countered. "And that makes it my fight, too." The journey back to Randsburg was tense, the 4 of them riding in grim silence. As they approached the outskirts, Sheriff Mills outlined his strategy. They would enter town separately, with the sheriff and his deputies creating a diversion while Owen approached the hotel from the rear. "What about me?" Willa asked. "You'll stay at the jail with Deputy Carson," the sheriff replied. "It's the safest place in town." Willa opened her mouth to protest, but Owen cut her off. "Please, Willa, do this for me. I can't face Harker if I'm worried about your safety." The earnestness in his plea silenced her objections. She nodded reluctantly. As they neared the town, Sheriff Mills and Thomas rode ahead to alert the waiting deputies. Owen and Willa followed more slowly, taking a circuitous route to avoid being spotted. "If something happens to me," Owen said quietly as they rode, "there's a letter in my saddlebag. It explains everything about Harker, evidence of his crimes. Make sure it gets to the U.S. Marshal's office in Denver." "Nothing will happen to you," Willa insisted, though fear knotted her stomach. Owen glanced over at her, a ghost of a smile touching his lips. "I've got something to live for now. That makes a difference." Before Willa could ask what he meant, they had reached the back of the jail. Deputy Carson was waiting to usher Willa inside, while Sheriff Mills led Owen toward the rear of the hotel. "Be careful," Willa called after him. Owen turned, their eyes meeting in a moment of perfect understanding before he disappeared around the corner with the sheriff. Inside the jail, Willa paced anxiously, straining to hear any sound of confrontation. Deputy Carson, a young man barely out of his teens, watched her nervously. "Sheriff Mills knows what he's doing, madam," he offered. "And that Callahan feller looks like he can handle himself." Willa nodded absently, her thoughts with Owen. The minutes crawled by with excruciating slowness. Then, just as the clock on the wall struck noon, the unmistakable sound of gunfire erupted from the direction of the hotel. "Stay here," Carson ordered, drawing his gun and moving toward the door. But Willa had no intention of remaining safely locked away while Owen's life hung in the balance. The moment Carson stepped outside, she slipped out behind him, heading not toward the gunfire but toward the schoolhouse. If Harker had threatened to burn it down, there was a chance one of his men might be there now, using the distraction of the confrontation at the hotel. The streets were deserted, everyone having taken cover at the first sound of shooting. Willa ran swiftly through the familiar paths, her heart hammering with fear and determination. As she rounded the corner to the schoolhouse, her worst fears were confirmed. Smoke was already rising from the back of the building. Without hesitation, Willa rushed forward. A man she didn't recognize was just coming around from behind the schoolhouse, a satisfied smirk on his face as he watched the smoke thicken. "Hey," Willa shouted, drawing his attention. "What have you done?" The man's surprise quickly gave way to malicious amusement. Well, well. You must be the schoolmarm Harker mentioned. Saves me the trouble of finding you." He advanced on her, and Willa realized her mistake too late. She backed away, looking frantically for something to use as a weapon. Her hand closed around a loose board from the schoolhouse steps. "Stay back," she warned, raising the board defensively. The man laughed, clearly unconcerned by her improvised weapon. "Harker said to bring you to him alive, but he didn't specify what condition." He lunged forward, grabbing for her arm. Willa swung the board with all her strength, catching him across the side of the head. He staggered, momentarily stunned, giving her the opportunity to flee. But instead of running away from the danger, she ran toward the smoking schoolhouse. If she could get inside to her quarters, she kept a small derringer in her dresser drawer, a gift from her father that she'd never imagined actually using. The front of the schoolhouse was still clear of smoke, though Willa could hear the ominous crackle of flames from the back room. She raced inside and up the stairs to her small apartment, yanking open the drawer where the derringer lay wrapped in a handkerchief. Her hands trembled as she checked that it was loaded, just as her father had taught her. The sound of heavy boots on the stairs told her she had only moments before Harker's man reached her. Willa positioned herself beside the door, the tiny gun clutched tightly in her sweating palm. The door burst open, and the man stormed in, blood trickling from where the board had struck him. He saw the empty room and cursed, turning to leave, and found himself staring down the barrel of Willa's derringer. "Don't move," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. The man froze, eyes narrowing as he assessed his options. "You won't shoot me," he said, though uncertainty tinged his voice. "Schoolmarms don't have the stomach for it. This one does." Willa kept the gun aimed at his chest. "Now turn around, hands where I can see them." For a moment it seemed he would comply. Then, with a sudden movement, he lunged for the gun. Willa squeezed the trigger, the small weapon bucking in her hand. The report was deafening in the confined space, followed by the man's howl of pain as the bullet grazed his shoulder. Stunned by what she'd done, Willa hesitated, a mistake that cost her dearly as the wounded man recovered and knocked the spent derringer from her hand. His fingers closed around her throat, rage contorting his features. "You'll pay for that," he snarled, tightening his grip. Spots danced before Willa's eyes as she struggled for breath, clawing desperately at his hands. The smoke was thickening now, seeping under the door from the spreading fire. Through her dimming vision, Willa was aware of a strange sound of frantic fluttering and chirping. The sparrow, which she had brought back to the schoolhouse in its box, had somehow escaped and was now darting about the room in agitation, its wing fully healed. In her oxygen-deprived state, Willa had the bizarre thought that the tiny bird was trying to help her. Suddenly, the man's grip loosened as he swatted at the sparrow, which was diving at his face with surprising aggression. Willa sucked in a desperate breath, the world swimming back into focus. The momentary distraction was all she needed. Gathering her remaining strength, she brought her knee up sharply, connecting with her attacker's groin. He doubled over with a grunt of pain, and Willa shoved past him, stumbling toward the door. The hallway was now filled with smoke, and she could feel the heat of the fire below. Coughing and half-blind, she made her way to the stairs, only to find them already engulfed in flames. Trapped, Willa retreated to her room, where Harker's man was recovering, rage in his eyes as he advanced on her once more. The sparrow continued its frenzied circling, as if urging her toward the window, her only remaining escape route. Without hesitation, Willa threw open the window and looked down. The drop was significant, at least 15 feet to the hard-packed dirt below, but with the fire spreading rapidly, she had no choice. Behind her, she heard the man lurch forward, his hand catching the back of her dress. With a desperate wrench, Willa tore free, leaving a piece of fabric in his grasp as she climbed onto the windowsill. The sparrow darted past her, out into the open air, its wings beating strongly as it soared away free at last. Taking it as a sign, Willa closed her eyes and jumped. The impact knocked the breath from her lungs, pain shooting up through her ankles and knees. But nothing seemed broken, and the urgency of her situation drove her to her feet despite the discomfort. Above, Harker's man was leaning out the window, cursing as he prepared to follow her. Willa staggered away from the building, now fully engulfed in flames. People were running toward the schoolhouse, carrying buckets of water in a futile attempt to douse the fire. Among them, Willa spotted Sheriff Mills, his face streaked with soot, his expression grim. "Miss Zimmerman," he called, rushing to her side. "Are you hurt?" "Where's Owen?" Willa demanded, clutching the sheriff's arm. "What happened at the hotel?" Before Mills could answer, a shot rang out and something hot whizzed past Willa's ear. Sheriff Mills pushed her down, drawing his own weapon as Harker's man emerged from the side of the burning building, gun in hand. "Drop it, Johnson," Mills shouted, but the man fired again, forcing the sheriff and Willa to take cover behind a water trough. More gunfire erupted from down the street, multiple shots in rapid succession. Willa's heart clenched with fear for Owen. "Stay here," Sheriff Mills ordered, before darting out from behind the trough to return fire at Johnson. But Willa had had enough of waiting safely while others faced danger. As soon as the sheriff was engaged with Johnson, she slipped away, keeping low as she made her way toward the sound of the gunfight. The scene that greeted her at the hotel was chaotic. 2 bodies lay in the street, men Willa didn't recognize, presumably Harker's accomplices. Deputy Carson was crouched behind an overturned cart, exchanging shots with someone inside the hotel. Of Owen, there was no sign. Fear propelled Willa forward despite the danger. She had to find him, had to know if he was alive. Staying close to the buildings, she worked her way around to the back of the hotel, where a service entrance stood partially open. The kitchen was deserted, the staff having fled at the first sound of gunfire. Willa moved cautiously through the space, following the sound of voices from the main room of the hotel. One of them, she realized with a surge of hope, was Owen's. Peering around the doorframe, Willa saw him alive, though bleeding from a graze on his temple. He stood in the center of the hotel lobby, his gun trained on a well-dressed man backed against the front desk. Even without an introduction, Willa knew this must be James Harker. He had the polished look of a banker, but his eyes held a cold, calculating cruelty that sent chills down her spine. "It's over, Harker," Owen was saying, his voice steady despite the blood trickling down his face. "Drop the gun." Harker's smile was reptilian. "After 3 years of chasing me, I think not, Marshal Callahan," he gestured with his own weapon. "Or is it just Callahan now? I heard you gave up the badge after what happened to your pretty wife." The taunt was designed to provoke, and Willa could see it hit its mark in the tightening of Owen's jaw, but he didn't rise to the bait. "Last chance," Owen said. "Surrender and you'll face a judge. Resist and you'll face your maker." Harker laughed, a sound devoid of humor. "Always the righteous lawman, even without the badge. Tell me, Callahan, what do you think your Eliza would say if she could see you now, hunting a man for years, throwing away your life for vengeance?" "Don't speak her name," Owen warned, his finger tightening on the trigger. "She called your name, you know," Harker continued, his voice taking on a taunting sing-song quality. "At the end, begged for her life. Such a waste of a beautiful woman." Willa could see Owen struggling with his rage, teetering on the edge of becoming the very thing he hunted, a cold-blooded killer. In that crucial moment, she stepped into view. "Owen," she called softly, drawing both men's attention. "Don't let him make you into something you're not." Harker's eyes widened slightly at the unexpected intrusion, but he recovered quickly, shifting his aim toward Willa with lightning speed. "The schoolmarm, I presume. How touching." "No," Owen shouted, lunging forward even as Harker squeezed the trigger. 2 shots rang out simultaneously. Willa felt the heat of Harker's bullet as it passed inches from her head, embedding itself in the doorframe behind her. At the same moment, Owen's shot found its mark, striking Harker squarely in the chest. The banker staggered backward, a look of genuine surprise crossing his features before he crumpled to the floor. His gun clattered from limp fingers as the life drained from his eyes. Owen was at Willa's side in an instant, his hands moving over her arms, her face, checking for injuries. "Are you hurt? Did he hit you?" "I'm fine," Willa assured him, though her voice shook. He missed. The relief that washed over Owen's features was palpable. Without warning, he pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly against his chest. "I thought when I saw him aim at you, I'm all right," Willa repeated, her own arms encircling him, feeling the rapid beat of his heart against her cheek. "It's over now." And it was. The man who had haunted Owen's life for 3 years lay dead, his threat extinguished forever. But as Willa felt Owen's arms tighten around her, she wondered what would come next. Now that his mission of vengeance was complete, would he simply move on, leave Randsburg and her behind? The aftermath of the confrontation was a blur of activity. Sheriff Mills and his deputies secured the scene, documenting the events for the official record. The town doctor tended to Owen's head wound, which proved superficial despite the dramatic bleeding. The schoolhouse, though badly damaged, was not a complete loss. The timely arrival of the bucket brigade had saved the main structure. Though Willa's living quarters were destroyed through it all, Owen remained at Willa's side, a steady, protective presence. It was only when the immediate crisis had passed, when they found themselves alone in a borrowed room at the boarding house, that Willa finally asked the question that had been weighing on her mind. "What will you do now?" Owen stood by the window, looking out at the town as evening descended. The events of the day had left visible marks on him, not just the bandage at his temple, but a weariness that seemed bone deep. Yet there was something else too, a lightness in his bearing, as if a great weight had been lifted. "I don't know," he admitted, turning to face her. "For 3 years, finding Harker was all I thought about. I never considered what would come after." Willa sat on the edge of the narrow bed, smoothing her soot-stained skirts. "You could return to Denver, perhaps, resume your position with the Marshal Service." Owen shook his head slowly. "That part of my life is over. I'm not the same man who wore that badge." "Then what?" Willa pressed gently. "Where will you go?" For a long moment, Owen was silent, his gaze fixed on her face with an intensity that made her heart beat faster. "I was thinking I might stay in Randsburg," he said finally, "if there's a reason to." The implication hung in the air between them, fragile as a soap bubble. Willa hardly dared breathe, afraid to shatter the moment. "The Sparrow," Owen continued, moving to sit beside her on the bed. "You saved it when anyone else would have left it to die, nursed it back to health, gave it a chance to fly again." He took her hand, his touch gentle despite the calluses that spoke of years of hard living. "You did the same for me, Willa. I was broken when you found me, not just the bullet wound, but inside, where it matters most." "Owen, let me finish," he said softly. "When Harker aimed at you today, I realized something. The thought of losing you terrified me more than anything has since Eliza died. Not because you remind me of her, you don't. Not really, but because somehow, without my noticing, you've become important to me, vital." Willa's eyes filled with tears. "I thought when it was over, you'd leave. That once Harker was gone, there'd be nothing to keep you here." "That's what I thought too," Owen admitted. "But I was wrong. There's you, Willa. If you'll have me, a broken man still learning how to live again." In answer, Willa leaned forward and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, before deepening into something that spoke of longing, of promise, of healing. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Owen's smile was the most genuine she had ever seen from him. "I'll take that as a yes," he murmured, his forehead resting against hers. "Yes," Willa confirmed, her heart fuller than she had believed possible. "Though I should warn you, I'm currently homeless and unemployed, thanks to your former adversary." Owen laughed, the sound rusty from disuse but genuinely joyful. "We'll rebuild, together." His expression grew more serious. "I have savings from my Marshal days, enough to start fresh wherever we choose. It doesn't have to be here if you'd rather go somewhere new." Willa considered this. Despite the day's trauma, Randsburg had become home to her in many ways. "The children still need a teacher," she said thoughtfully. "And I suspect the town will rebuild the schoolhouse quickly enough. And me, what would I do in a mining town like this?" "Sheriff Mills mentioned he's been looking for a deputy with experience," Willa suggested. "Someone who knows how to handle trouble when it comes calling." Owen raised an eyebrow. "Back to wearing a badge. I'm not sure that's what I want anymore." "Then don't," Willa said simply. "There's the livery stable Mr. Daniels has been talking about retiring. Or homesteading, there's still land available not far from town." The possibilities stretched before them, a future neither had imagined possible just days before. Whatever path they chose, Willa knew with certainty that they would walk it together. As the conversation turned to practical matters of rebuilding and new beginnings, a familiar chirping drew their attention to the window. There, perched on the sill, was the sparrow, its wing fully healed, its freedom complete, yet it had returned. "Look who's come to check on us," Willa said, smiling. Owen crossed to the window, opening it to let the small bird hop onto his outstretched finger. "Welcome back, little one." The sparrow chirped once, bright eyes darting between them before taking wing once more. They watched it soar into the gathering dusk, its flight strong and sure. "Free," Owen murmured. "Truly free at last." As he turned back to Willa, she saw in his eyes that he was speaking not just of the bird, but of himself, free from the prison of vengeance, free to build a new life from the broken pieces of the old. And she knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. Two healing souls who had found in each other the strength to fly again. The rebuilding of Randsburg's schoolhouse became a community affair, with men, women, and even children contributing what they could. Within 3 weeks of the fire, a new structure stood on the site of the old, sturdier, larger, with proper living quarters above for the teacher. The town's newfound appreciation for education, and for Miss Zimmerman, manifested in generous donations of books, slates, and even a small piano contributed by the owner of the Silver Dollar Saloon, who claimed his establishment had upgraded to a bigger model. During the construction, Willa stayed at the boarding house, teaching her classes in a tent erected beside the building site so the children could watch the progress of their new school. Owen, true to his word, remained in Randsburg. After careful consideration, he declined Sheriff Mills's offer of a deputy position, choosing instead to partner with aging Mr. Daniels at the livery stable. The work suited him, honest labor that allowed him to use his knowledge of horses while keeping a respectful distance from the law enforcement life he'd left behind. Their courtship progressed with the measured pace of two people who understood the value of building something lasting. They took evening walks along the creek, shared meals at the hotel restaurant, and spent quiet hours on the boarding house porch, planning their future together. The townspeople quickly grew accustomed to seeing them as a pair, and speculation about a wedding became Randsburg's favorite topic of conversation. On the day the schoolhouse was completed, Owen found Willa standing alone in her new classroom, running her fingers over the smooth surface of her desk. "It's perfect," she said as he entered. "Better than before." Owen smiled, coming to stand beside her. "Sometimes that's how it works. What's rebuilt can be stronger than what was lost." The double meaning wasn't lost on either of them. Willa leaned into him, his arm automatically encircling her waist in the comfortable way they'd grown accustomed to. "I have something to show you," Owen said, taking her hand and leading her outside. Behind the schoolhouse, where once there had been only bare dirt, a small garden had been planted. In its center stood a birdhouse, crafted with careful attention to detail. "I thought our little friend might appreciate a proper home, should it decide to stay," Owen explained. "And I thought you might like having a garden again. I remember you mentioning your mother's garden back in Missouri." Tears sprang to Willa's eyes at the thoughtfulness of the gesture. "Owen, it's wonderful." He shifted slightly, suddenly appearing nervous in a way she hadn't seen before. "There's something else." Reaching into his pocket, he withdrew a small wooden box. "I've been carrying this for a week, waiting for the right moment." Willa's breath caught as he opened the box to reveal a ring, a delicate gold band set with a small but perfect diamond. "I know we haven't known each other long," Owen began, his voice husky with emotion, "but I've lived enough to recognize what matters. You matter, Willa. Your kindness, your strength, your capacity for healing what's broken." He took a deep breath. "I love you. Will you marry me?" "Yes," Willa answered without hesitation, her heart full to bursting. "Yes, Owen, I will." As he slipped the ring onto her finger, a familiar chirping drew their attention upward. The sparrow had returned, circling once above their heads before landing on the new birdhouse, its approval apparent in the tilt of its head. I think that's a sign of good luck, Willa laughed, wiping away happy tears. I don't need luck, Owen replied, drawing her into his arms. I have you. Their wedding took place on a perfect autumn day with the aspen trees surrounding Randsburg ablaze with golden color. The entire town turned out for the occasion, the church filled to capacity with miners, merchants, and the 23 children from Willa's school, all dressed in their Sunday best. Sheriff Mills stood as Owen's best man, while Mrs. Patterson, the storekeeper's wife who had taken Willa under her wing, served as matron of honor. The ceremony was simple but heartfelt, the bride radiant in a gown of ivory silk, ordered specially from San Francisco, and the groom resplendent in a new black suit, purchased with similar extravagance. When they exchanged vows, Owen's voice carried clearly through the church, his promise to love and cherish Willa for all the days of his life spoken with unwavering conviction. Willa's response, though softer, was equally certain, her eyes never leaving his as she pledged herself to him. As they emerged from the church as husband and wife, a shower of rice and flower petals rained down upon them from the enthusiastic well-wishers. And there, perched on the church sign, was the sparrow, its presence now an expected good omen at all significant moments in their lives. The celebration continued well into the evening, with dancing, feasting, and more than a few emotional toasts to the couple's happiness. When they finally departed for the small house, Owen had purchased on the edge of town close enough for Willa to walk to school each day. Yet with enough land for the garden, they both wanted the entire town lined the street to see them off. Their first night as husband and wife was everything Willa had dreamed it might be: tender, passionate, the joining of two souls who had found in each other the healing they both needed. As they lay tangled together in the quiet aftermath, Owen traced the curve of Willa's cheek with gentle fingers. I never thought I'd feel this way again, he confessed. After Eliza died, I believed that part of me died too, but you brought me back to life, Willa. We brought each other back, she corrected softly, her head resting on his chest, the steady beat of his heart beneath her ear the most comforting sound she'd ever known. The days turned to weeks, the weeks to months, and the Callahans settled into the rhythm of their new life together. Owen's partnership with Mr. Daniels flourished, eventually leading to his purchase of the livery when the older man decided to retire completely and move to San Francisco to live with his daughter. Willa continued teaching, her classroom growing as Randsburg prospered from the ongoing mining operations. Spring arrived with a burst of wildflowers and an unexpected discovery: Willa was with child. The news brought joy not only to the expectant parents but to the entire town, which had embraced the couple as their own. A baby, Owen marveled, his hand gentle on the slight swell of Willa's belly. Our child. The wonder in his voice brought tears to Willa's eyes. Are you happy? Beyond measure, he assured her, gathering her close. You've given me everything I never dared hope for, Willa. A home, a future, and now a family. As Willa's pregnancy progressed, the Sparrow continued its regular visits, often perching on the garden fence while Willa tended her vegetables and flowers. Owen joked that it was keeping watch over her when he couldn't be there, a guardian angel in feathered form. One warm evening in late summer, as they sat on their porch watching the sunset paint the mountains in hues of gold and pink, Owen voiced a thought that had been forming for some time. I've been thinking about expanding the livery, he said. Not just boarding and shoeing horses, but breeding them, quality stock for the ranches that are starting to establish in the valley. Willa considered this. It would mean more land, wouldn't it? More than we have here. Owen nodded. There's a property about 3 miles outside of town. 200 acres with good water and pasture. The owner's looking to sell, heading back east, they say. But what about my teaching? The school? I thought of that, Owen assured her. We could keep this house for during the school week if you wanted to continue teaching. Or… He hesitated, clearly having given this significant thought. The property has a solid house bigger than this one. It would be a fine place to raise children. Willa placed a hand on her rounded belly, feeling the flutter of movement within. Children, plural. Owen's smile was both sheepish and hopeful. I thought perhaps more than one, eventually. If you wanted. The image formed in Willa's mind, a house filled with the laughter of children, land where they could run free, a life built on love and hard work. It was everything she'd ever wanted without fully realizing it. I think, she said slowly, that I might be ready for a change. The new schoolteacher they've hired to help with the younger children, Miss Thompson, she's very capable. Perhaps by next year she could take over. The joy that spread across Owen's face told her she'd made the right decision. We'll build something wonderful there, Willa. I promise you. And they did. The purchase of the ranch, which they named Sparrow Creek, in honor of their feathered friend, marked the beginning of a new chapter. By the time their son William was born that winter, a strong, healthy boy with his father's gray eyes and his mother's determined spirit, the transition was well underway. Willa completed the school year as promised, then passed the teaching position to Miss Thompson with her blessing. The family moved permanently to the ranch, where Owen's vision of a horse breeding operation began to take shape. Using his savings and a small loan from the bank, he acquired a stallion of exceptional quality and several promising mares, the foundation of what would become one of the most respected horse breeding programs in the territory. Life at Sparrow Creek settled into a rhythm dictated by the seasons, the needs of the animals, and the growing family. William was joined 2 years later by a sister, Elizabeth, named for both Willa's mother and, in a gesture that brought tears to Owen's eyes, for Eliza. The children thrived in the freedom of ranch life, though Willa ensured their education wasn't neglected, teaching them herself until they were old enough to attend school in town. The Sparrow, remarkably, continued to make appearances at significant moments in their lives. The day they moved to the ranch, the births of both children, the day Owen's first homebred colt won the race at the county fair. Its presence became such a constant that even the children accepted it as a special guardian of the family, leaving seeds and berries on the porch railing for its visits. As the years passed, the ranch prospered, becoming known throughout California for its fine horses. Owen, once driven solely by vengeance, found fulfillment in building something that would outlast him, a legacy for his children, a contribution to the community that had given him a second chance at life. Willa, too, found unexpected satisfaction in her role as ranch wife and mother. She started a small school for the children of neighboring ranches, taught once a week in her dining room. She established a renowned garden, cultivating not only vegetables for the family table but medicinal herbs that local doctors came to rely upon. And she continued to heal wounded creatures brought to her by her children or ranch hands, birds with broken wings, rabbits caught in traps, once even a young deer with an injured leg. You can't save them all, you know, Owen teased gently after she'd spent 3 nights nursing a sickly foal that others had given up for lost. I can try, Willa replied with the same determination that had once led her to save a wounded stranger and a broken sparrow. The foals survived, growing into one of their finest horses, further proof, if any were needed, of Willa's healing touch. On the 10th anniversary of their wedding, Owen surprised Willa with a special gift, a delicate gold pendant in the shape of a sparrow, its wings outstretched in flight, a tiny diamond for its eye. "To remind you," he said as he fastened it around her neck, "of how our story began." Willa touched the pendant gently, tears welling in her eyes. "As if I could ever forget." "No regrets?" Owen asked, a hint of vulnerability still visible beneath the confidence of the successful rancher he'd become. "About any of it?" Willa looked around at the home they'd built together, at William reading by the fire, showing his father's quiet intensity, at Elizabeth playing with her dolls, her mother's compassion evident in how tenderly she cared for them, at the prosperous ranch visible through the windows, the result of their combined efforts. "Not a single one," she assured him, reaching up to caress his face, now bearing the distinguished lines of a man in his prime. "Every step we took led us here together. How could I regret any of it?" Later that night, as they stood on the porch watching the stars emerge in the vast California sky, a familiar chirping drew their attention. The sparrow, or perhaps a descendant of their original feathered friend, perched on the railing, regarding them with bright, knowing eyes. "Hello, old friend," Owen greeted it softly. "Still watching over us after all these years?" In response, the sparrow trilled a brief melody before taking flight, soaring upward until it disappeared among the stars. Owen and Willa watched it go, his arm around her waist, her head on his shoulder, their hearts beating in the synchronized rhythm of two people who had found in each other everything they needed to be whole. "You saved that bird with a broken wing," Owen mused, echoing words spoken long ago in a small cabin outside Randsburg. "You saved me too, you know. I was broken once." "And you saved me," Willa replied, turning in his arms to face him. "We saved each other." As their lips met in a kiss that carried all the tenderness and passion of their decade together, both knew with absolute certainty that they had built something rare and precious, a love strong enough to heal even the deepest wounds, to transform brokenness into beauty, to soar like a sparrow with mended wings into a limitless sky of possibility. And in that moment, under the vast canopy of stars, surrounded by the life they'd created together, they understood that this love, this family, this journey of healing and hope was only the beginning of their story. The best chapters were still being written, day by day, heart by heart, in the language of a love that had saved them both.